Hello, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. The topic for today's Todd Talk will be case studies, which falls in our series of inquiry-based learning. Case-based learning falls under the inquiry diagram, such as you see here. So what you have here is problem-based learning, which we've already talked about, projects and research, which is project-based learning, which we've already talked about, and then small-scale investigations. So these are case studies. Case studies were first widely used in the law field, where lawyers will look at past cases and try to learn from those, and precedents that have been set, things that have been done that they can repeat, mistakes they had made that they can avoid. And then it was used also highly in the medical field, where doctors would look at past cases where mistakes were made and try to figure out ways that they could prevent that from happening in the future. So it's been around for a little while, but it's not as widely used in our American junior highs, high schools. You see it mostly overseas in European countries and Australia, but it is a really effective way of learning. The reason why it's an effective way of learning is that case-based learning takes real-life scenarios and asks students to come up with solutions for those real-life scenarios. So it's a little bit similar to problem-based learning, except for instead of just one situation, a case involves giving you lots of research and to go on as well, so that you are backing up what it is that you are the solution that you're coming up with based upon evidence. Because it's based on real things and real resources, it's going to be more relevant to students, and which means that they're going to be more engaged, they're going to find it more interesting. It does require the teacher to select the research that they're going to use and that students will be using. So it does require some work up front from the teacher. If you pick a good case, a case that's controversial or open-ended, it's going to lead to a lot of good discussion, and it's going to increase their curiosity in the topic, so that they'll go out and find information on their own rather than because it's for an assignment or whatever. So it's learning for learning's sake. And then finally, the case-based learning is active. So even though the teacher is more involved in case-based learning, which we'll talk about in a little bit, than in project-based learning or problem-based learning, regardless, the students are very involved, they're very engaged, and so they learn how to work on their case as a group. So the basic steps to case-based learning, as you can see here, is that a case is presented. This is usually provided by the teacher. This includes a scenario, research, all that's going to be needed for the case. Students are more than welcome to find supplementary materials that will help them in their research of the case, but the teacher is going to provide a lot of guidance on what to look at specifically. So if you're looking at specifically like the Constitution of the United States, you might provide the Constitution for them to read so that they can use that as part of their case. So the teacher presents the case. The case then is looked over by the group. So the group looks over what are the elements of the case, what needs to be done, what needs to be solved. Then they are going to brainstorm ideas for solutions for whatever this case might be. So it could be a science case where they're looking at like the discovery of penicillin and how that happened and how that could have happened sooner, or looking at specific cases of cancer and what can be done to help with that. They're going to brainstorm tons of ideas. It's kind of the idea is that they're throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks. So once they have done these brainstorming, they're going to narrow it down to what it is they're going to learn from this case. So what is basically their central question or main idea of the case. So once they have that main idea, their main learning objectives, then they're going to sift through all of that research that you provided and that they found, and try to find out what is going to be most relevant to helping them solve their case. So once they put this all together, then they create a presentation of their findings. So what is it that they discovered? What solution do they think is best and why? Very important there. And then lastly, of course, is a reflection, where students look back on the case and what are areas. So they're actually doing a case-based learning on their own case, and what they have learned from it and what they can improve in moving forward and using cases. You'll see the brackets that are in the various parts. So in steps 2, 4, 5, and 7. And what that indicates are these are prime places for the teacher to come in and be involved. And I don't mean involved as in they're running things, but what I mean is that they're sort of the meddler in the middle. So rather than the sage from the stage in front of the class or the guide from the side where they're just watching and observing and helping nudge every once in a while, the meddler in the middle comes up and asks probing questions that would challenge students to think about things in a different way. And so this meddler in the middle is a good way to push students to the next level and to challenge them to think about things that they haven't previously been thinking about. So when you go to create your own case-based learning, there are characteristics of a good study. So first off, as always, it should align to your content. So your content standards or your learning objectives, whatever it is in your class. And a good way to do this is by writing your own cases. I will have a future TED Talk that will talk about how to write your own cases. You can find cases online. You can buy cases online. There are lots of resources to find cases, but I have found that it's better to create it yourself, and that way you can tailor it to fit the needs of your specific class. And one of those needs is your instructional goals and objectives. Story is really important to a case. So a case has a story behind it that is very intriguing. This is what is going to engage students. So is it about a person? What is that person dealing with? What are they trying to overcome? And this is human element story, human interest story, and it allows students to kind of get their hooks into them and to get them interested in what it is that they're learning about because of the story. It's not just some nameless, faceless number or statistic or whatever. That this is a real human being or a real situation. The case should be relevant to the reader. So, as much as possible, try to find cases that are going to be important to students that you're the age that you're teaching. So this could be things from, trying to solve, issues of hunger overseas, or, the environmental issues that are really important to students of that age. Those are all cases that could be chosen. It should be controversial, your case. So it shouldn't be cut and dry. Otherwise, why study that case? So it should be controversial in that it provokes conflict and it forces students to be creative in their decision making. And then lastly is that the case should be general enough so that it can be used in several applications. So what that means is that it could, even though cases don't need to be specific to social studies, which a lot of people would think. You can have cases in English. You can have cases in math. You can have cases in science. Examples of that would be like looking at, the stock market crash, the Black Tuesday, where the stock market, bottomed out and caused the start of the Great Depression. You could look at that and the finances behind that and the numbers behind that, and as a case study for math. For language arts, you could look at a character in a book. So when it comes to Kill a Mockingbird, could you put Boo Radley on trial yourself and try to run elements of the story through this and how it might be different? So in science, you can look at lots of, like one example I give in my book is the Chernobyl and the nuclear meltdown. What could have been done to have prevented that? What were the causes of it and what might have been done differently? So those are characteristics of a good case study. So when it comes to the involvement of the teacher in case-based learning, just like most forms of inquiry-based learning, it is very different than your traditional being in front of the classroom, sage from the stage type of teaching. What you see here in this diagram is the bigger the circle, the more active the learning, or the more involved that students are in the driving of the learning. And so in inquiry-based learning, which is the biggest circle, you can see that students are learning, are the ones who are making the decisions on the topics and what they're going to study and what they're interested in. And the teacher there is just to kind of help guide them and help provide resources that would enable them to study what it is what they want to study. With problem-based learning and project-based learning, the teacher is a little more involved in that they're that guide from the side. They are maybe setting up the essential question for the students, and then the students are then deciding what it is how they're going to approach that essential question. When it comes to case-based learning, this is out of the three versions of inquiry-based learning, the teacher's the most involved during this. And I'll show you what that looks like. But I kind of already talked about how the meddler in the middle and how the teacher's involvement is that they go over and make sure that they are getting students to think about things in a different way. Along with that, when it comes to case-based learning, is when students are going to do a prior reading when it comes to case-based learning, and this is a reading that is provided by the teacher. So this is, again, something that the teacher is controlling. Then they're going to kind of look at the problem, either similar cases or things of that nature. The teacher's going to provide a lot of resources, but students are depending upon the level of the students and the skill level, you should encourage them to seek outside sources that are pertinent to their case that would help with that. And then they figure out how they're going to present their material. But if you notice in this that the teacher's role is very active. So instead of just sitting back and letting students do most of the work, the teacher is more involved, less involved than a traditional classroom, but more involved in the sense of when it comes to inquiry-based learning. So there you have it, case-based learning, which is a really effective way of teaching students by learning about the past and learning about real-world cases that have happened. If you would like to know more about case-based learning, I have a book coming out this fall of 2019 called Case-Based Learning from Proof Rock Press.